Hi there, this is John Wilkinson again from History Made Easier, with a presentation that will consider the nature, the role, the impact and the importance or significance, particularly for victory, of naval power. Now, in the war at sea, Britain held most of the advantages. The size of its overall fleet was still much larger than Germany's. Britain had won the naval race. It had more ships, different types of ships, faster and with more firepower, though the German ships did prove harder to sink. Whilst there were also the fleets of its allies, France, Russia, Italy and Japan. More than enough to match those of Austria-Hungary and Turkey, which meant the Baltic and Black Seas and the Mediterranean were fully covered, with Japan taking care of the Pacific. And this is before America got involved. And Britain was also strategically better placed to enforce an effective blockade, though the German U-boats set a significant challenge. Britain is, of course, an island off the coast of mainland Europe, whilst Germany only has a small coastline, part of it on the Baltic Sea, and its naval bases at Wilhelmshaven on the North Sea and Kiel on the Baltic Sea, though joined by the newly completed Kiel Canal, were easier to blockade. Besides, if Germany's warships had broken out and reached open sea, they didn't have the fueling stations that Britain had with its worldwide empire. Alfred von Tirpitz's strategy, therefore, was to build a risk fleet, big enough and powerful enough to deter Britain from engaging it, knowing that it wouldn't be able to do so with all its strength, due to its worldwide commitments, especially as Germany would be able to choose the timing of any engagement. Britain might win a major sea battle, but its fleet could be so weakened as to leave Britain vulnerable to attack from another naval power, and so it was hoped it would not risk engagement. After all, Britain had one major disadvantage. It needed to defend its interests all over the world, and at the very last resort, the Navy had to protect Britain from invasion. Britain, aware that it had to retain its supremacy at sea at all costs, played according to Tirpitz's plan. And as I've said, it won the naval race. So, with war declared, it didn't look to risk a major sea battle. But still, naval supremacy was an advantage it was determined to maximise. And as I've pointed out, Germany had a serious weakness. Its access points to open waters were limited and could be further restricted with constant patrols and with the approaches mined. And that's what Britain did as soon as war broke out. The British strategy, playing to their strengths, was a distant blockade. To begin with, Germany simply adopted the fleet in being strategy. That is, holding on to a fleet that could threaten British supremacy of the seas, but without risking it, though it did mine British waters too. So, whilst the British fleets took to the seas in order to impose their distant blockade, that is, away from the German ports, the German fleet did nothing, and by doing nothing it continued to be a threat, and caused the British to keep a careful watch on its base at Wilhelmshaven, in case it should venture out to sea. Except the German fleet didn't quite do nothing. The Germans undertook what came to be called tip and run raids. The purpose of the raids was to tempt the British to send ships out to stop their raids. The German ships would allow themselves to be chased, leading the British ships into a trap where they would then be attacked by a stronger German force. The trouble was that the British had gained the German secret naval ciphers and had also set up wireless stations along their east coast in order to monitor German radio traffic, so that when the biggest tip and run raid of them all ended in the Battle of Jutland was put into operation at the end of May 1916, the British knew what they were heading into. And though the German fleet got the better of the British at Jutland, it still left the British fleet much stronger, and so the German fleet remained a fleet in being. So, despite coming off better at Jutland, it was a strategic defeat for the Germans. Now to the blockades. The first thing to say is that both Britain and Germany broke the rules of war, and both powers made the decision that anything that could help maintain the enemy's ability to stay in the fight would be blockaded, which would include food. Britain's distant blockade had ships positioned between the English coast and northern France, a matter of only some 30 plus kilometres to patrol, and the other between Scotland and Norway, much wider, covering more than 330 kilometres. Neutral ships would be searched at sea, or else obliged to stop in British ports, where they would be searched before being escorted through the mined waters to their port of destination. Germany's blockade relied on U-boats, and the key result of the Battle of Jutland was that it would eventually lead the Germans to restart unrestricted submarine warfare. That is, the sinking of any ships, including those from neutral countries, approaching Britain, without the specific knowledge of what those ships were carrying, nor the ability to secure the safety of the sailors on those ships. And it came close to succeeding. The tonnage lost in those first months of 1917 was such that Britain was in serious trouble. What saved the situation for Britain, pushed by Lord George, not the British Royal Navy, and a decision made easier by America's entry into the war, was the use of convoys, which worked by grouping merchant ships together, protected by a ring of warships. It wasn't easy, though. They had to sail at the same speed, keeping station, their place in the line, and they were required to zigzag as one when ships of vastly different capabilities would be sailing together. A convoy of, say, 10 to 15 merchant ships, sometimes with a troop ship included, would be shielded by a cruiser, maybe 6 destroyers, armed trawlers, that's fishing boats, and maybe a couple of torpedo boats. The torpedo boats would have an aerial balloon with observers who would look for submarines, as well as the tracks of torpedoes. And such is the vastness of the oceans that even a large convoy would be just as difficult to find on the open seas as a single ship. Whilst even if a submarine came across a convoy, once it attacked, it would announce its presence and face attack itself. and if a ship was sunk, the convoy would at least be on hand to assist survivors. And as I end, don't forget that for Germany, the war at sea was to end in ignominy when the High Seas Fleet mutinied in Wilhelmshaven and at Kiel at the end of October 1918. The newly promoted Commander-in-Chief, Admiral Franz von Hieper, thought it a good idea if the fleet would end the war in a blaze of glory by at last taking on the British Grand Fleet for a second time, Jutland being the first. The sailors disagreed. And I'll stop there. But let me add that I do have more detailed notes which I can send you if you would like me to. Just email me at historymadeeasier@gmail.com, and as I always say, be assured I will not pester you with emails. As always, thank you so much for listening, and as always, let me wish you the best of luck in your studies. Cheers. What you got, my little minx?